Hello, this is Pastor Russ, and it's now time for our mini Bible study, a study that we can do in 10 minutes or less. So glad to have you with me. Today we're going to be studying chapter 38 of Genesis. It's one that we're going to take a little break from our story of Joseph in Egypt, and we're going to take a look at one of his brothers, Judah, and his relationship, illicit relationship with his daughter-in-law Tamar. So we're going to take a look at that now. If you have your Bibles, open them up to Genesis 38. At that time, Judah left his brothers, and this was after they had sold Joseph into slavery. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. There, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and lay with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kizib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, lie with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep her from producing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so he put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. Now, just a little word here, commentary, that in these days, women, especially single widowed women, could not fend for themselves. It wasn't like they could just go out and go to school, get a job, something like that. They were really dependent upon their family and their husbands. And when they got to be married, then their own family didn't take care of them any longer. They weren't their responsibility. And so they were the responsibility of the husband's family. And if the husband were to die, then it was the responsibility of a brother of the husband to, produce offspring or heirs that would then be in charge. So that's what we're doing. That's what's going on here with Tamar, kind of a different kind of a custom than we're used to here. And the brothers die because they're wicked. And the only one brother that's left, Shelah, is too young. He is, what Judah says is, live with in my house. I'll take care of you, provide food and shelter for you. And then we'll wait till Shelah gets old enough, and then he can help produce this offspring. So now Tamar is in the house of Judah. Verse 12. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, the Abdullamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on the way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself in a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to this city named Eniam, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she covered her face. That's how they could identify these prostitutes. And they had what was called temple prostitutes, or shrine prostitutes, that would take part of the offering, keep for themselves, and the rest of the offering went to the shrine or to the temple. And again, another strange, different custom that we don't have today. So Judah saw her in verse 15, and he thought she was a prostitute. Verse 16. Now, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he said. Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked. He said, what pledge should I give you? Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand, she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah had sent the young goat by his friend, the Abdullamite, in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. He asked the man who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Eniam?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who live there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Well, let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughing stock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. And she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. She was, as she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it onto his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was given the name Zerah, which can mean brightness or it can mean scarlet. So we have here kind of a strange tale of different customs and people getting in disguise, Tamar tricking her father-in-law not fulfilling his promise that to give her his son Shelah, as a husband. And so now we're going to go back to the Joseph story, starting in verse 39. But this is Pastor Russ, hoping that you can check things out. If you would just go to my website, go to pastorruss.net right here on the screen. Go to that. That's my website, and you're going to find lots of wonderful things there, videos, blogs, other things there that, songs, things like that. I also encourage you to check out my Facebook, which is Through the Fire with Pastor Russ. Every day I have things like this Bible study that we're doing, or a hymn song, or a devotion of the week. But hope you have a great day today. This is Pastor Russ, and we'll see you again really soon. God bless.